Hey guys, welcome back to another Undercards upload. Today, I'm going to be taking a different approach. More like a laid-back post-commentary video with more editing than actual gameplay. If you like this kind of stuff, be sure to let me know in the comments so I can do more like it. Anyways, today I'm going to be ranking all of the DT cards and Undercards as of Season 71. These cards will be ranked from worst to best. Also, before we get into the video, I'll make this quick so you don't have to tolerate it for too long. I know a lot of YouTubers pride their viewers to subscribe simply for more subscribers, but I'll tell it to you how it is. If you really do enjoy my content and want to see more, subscribe so that you'll be notified of when another video comes out. If you don't particularly enjoy my content enough to watch it religiously, that's okay. I just appreciate the fact that you're watching this video. Anyways, sorry to bore you with the details. Now it's time to move on to the first DT on this list. At number 8, we have the Heroine. Many people have disagreed with me on this, but I have a good reason. DT cards are usually DT because they are significantly more powerful than other cards, hence why they're so hard to get and you can only run one in your deck at a time. Usually, your deck should have a DT since they raise the likelihood of you winning a lot. This isn't really the case with the Heroine. This card has a condition, which, if you didn't know, is basically something you have to accomplish for the card to properly function. In this case, you have to have one card of each rarity besides base rarity in your dust pile. In order to understand why this is so detrimental to the card, let's look at its effect. Instead of dying, return with -2/-2 if you have a common, rare, epic, and legendary in your dust pile. Magic, gain, taunt. Hypothetically, if you were to play this card without its condition being met, you just play a 10 cost 8/8 taunt card. You could probably see where this is lacking in effectiveness now. The only real decks I see fluently pulling off this card is library decks. Usually you'll find yourself picking other DTs simply because they require little to no effort to use, unlike this card. In my humble opinion, this card is heavily outclassed by other DT cards, which is why it's placed at the bottom of this list. I will admit, I've gotten this card off before, however, even when I did meet its condition and its effect triggered, I didn't find myself getting much use out of it since it's very easily outplayed by high ranks. Now, I have to confess, I'm not sure if you can buff this card and have it come back with -2/-2, or if the fine print is wrong and it just comes back with -2/-2 base stats. Let's look at its effect. Instead of dying, return with -2/-2. If you can buff up the card so it essentially never really dies, that makes this DT much better. But as of now, since I don't know that information, I have to place this DT at number 8. It feels weird to place this card at number 7 since it isn't a bad card, but at the same time, it doesn't give you the value other DT cards do. At number 7, we have Spam to Neo, or SNEO for short. SNEO gives your opponent an artifact that essentially gives your opponent a spell that they have to play. If they don't play this card, they will instantly lose the game since a big shot will be casted. Essentially, the spell SNEO gives you forces you to choose from 4 other spells called bargains. All of these bargains negatively affect you, but not as much as instantly losing to not playing any of them. The spells do as follow. Click here to die reduces the health of your highest health ally monster by 6. Generosity makes you lose 6G while your opponent gains 6G. Hot Single reduces the stats of all monsters in your hand by 2 and all monsters on your field by 1. And finally, press F1 for help, the most commonly picked one, gives your opponent 8 health. Usually, this DT is just a card that forces you to give your opponent an additional 24 health since it's the least detrimental choice to you. It's worth mentioning that you also get a 13 health taunt card on the field, which your opponent has to work through since DT cards can't be silenced. All in all, this card is very useful, just not as much as other options, which is why it places here on the list. This card is hard to place at 6 since all DTs from this point forward are very useful. At number 6, we have Angel of Death. Angel of Death is a 13 cost 9/11 that when played, summons an exact copy of an ally monster. We'll get to the dust effect of this DT in a moment, but for now, let's talk about the magic of this card. Summoning an exact copy of an ally monster is extremely useful, but at the same time somewhat useless in some scenarios. If you're duping to have a big body on the field, then this card is quite useful, but if you're duping, let's say, an Alphys, then it's not very good. Whenever a card has you summon a monster, the effect of that monster does not trigger, which means any card where the primary value comes from the effect is pretty much useless to summon. You're better off summoning a copy of something like Muffet or Papyrus. Summoning large haste monsters is a very good play with this monster. Now, onto the dust effect. When this monster dies, it fills your board with a random token Lost Souls. This is extremely useful since your opponent pretty much needs to kill this card. Your opponent having a 9 attack monster on the field is simply too dangerous otherwise. Since by the time your opponent picks this monster off the field, it'll be your turn, you have a full board of 3/3 monsters to work with, meaning you have 12 potential face damage and enough board presence to force your opponent into a losing position. Your opponent will have likely used all their G to deal with Angel of Death in the first place, meaning they will have their money sucked dry, dealing with all of these Lost Souls as well. Overall, this card is very good, which is why it feels weird to place here, but when you see the other DTs on this list, you'll understand why. Next up, we have Omega Flowey at number 5. Omega Flowey and Angel of Death are somewhat tied to me in power. Omega Flowey saves the current state of the board and gives you the option to load the board for that state at any time. It is worth noting that only the board presence is saved. This means any card in your hand at the time will not be reloaded. Usually, you'll want to use Omega Flowey when your board presence is much more fierce than your opponent's. Omega Flowey is most certainly a more safe DT to play. This DT is the hardest to explain since the exact scenarios in which you'd use this card are so specific that I can't even make them up. It's like I'd have to play through the exact scenarios to even think of them in the first place. Basically, what you should take away from this DT is that if you fear your opponent gaining the upper hand on you, this is the card to play. I feel like this card also has some OTK potential that just has yet to be found out. Anyways, let's move on to the next DT since I'm kind of at a loss for words on this one. Now we're in the upper half of this list, which is where things get serious. At number 4, we have Chris. As of writing this script, I only own 2 DTs, which consist of the Heroine and Chris. I find myself running Chris much more often than Heroine, and I think Chris would still be one of my most played DTs even if I had all of them. Chris is an extremely satisfying card to play with, in my opinion. But that's enough blabbing. You're here to see what makes this monster so powerful. Chris is a 4/10 haste card that reads as follows. Whenever this attacks and kills a monster, gain +2/+1. Turn end, draw a card that keeps this card's buffs. This effect is extremely useful at hand buffing and drawing. Usually, you will get 2 uses from this card. You may be wondering why your opponents wouldn't just kill this the turn after it's played. That's because, to make this card get more value than proccing once, the card has transparency. Not only do you get removal, you hand buff and gain more draw. This card has potential in many types of decks, namely being face, aggro, and mid-range. Another thing to note about this card is you can use cards such as Sugar Pot or Town Hall Guy to hand buff this card, then play him to draw cards that get the buffs you already gave to him before even putting him and his haste to use. This card is a card you can find yourself playing most of the time since you don't really need to wait for the right moment to play it, with the exception of a monster on the field needing to be in kill range. Personally, Chris is my favorite DT in the game, which is why it pains me to place it at number 4, but it's undeniable that other DTs are better than this one. At 3, we have something that honestly pains me to place this high on the list, but here we have Frisk. Frisk is a 7/8 taunt card that turns every card into your deck into a legendary Undertale card with -2 cost. At first, you may be thinking, that is pretty OP, but is it really better than other cards you placed lower on the list? Usually I'd say yes, but the meta right now refutes that. There's a card in the game called Shovels that basically puts infinite cards in your deck until the end of your turn. If you manage to save the G to play Shovels and Frisk in the same turn, you essentially have an infinite deck with -2 cost legendaries. This combo is extremely prevalent in the meta right now, and I'm sure other players can agree with me when I say this. It is extremely annoying and at times unfun. If Shovels weren't a card in the game, I'm sure I'd place this card lower on the list, but because of this broken strategy, if you can even consider it that, it has to place this high for me. I can't believe I placed Frisk above Chris, an extremely versatile card, because of one strategy. Let that sink in. A card that has infinite use cases is outclassed by a card that has one. When I was writing the script, I left out 2 DTs by accident. One of these DTs was Ultimathrash. Ultimathrash is a 5/9 haste candy card. You may be wondering, what's so amazing about this monster? And that's where its effect comes into play. Ultimathrash pairs with an artifact you can buy called Evil Plan. Evil Plan by itself isn't that good, but when you pair it with this DT, the value you get from it is unattainable anywhere else. Evil Plan burns your Ultimathrash to become Ultimate Fusion Artifact. What this artifact does is at the start of every turn until turn 15, you send the rightmost card in your hand to the top of your deck, and add the next thrashing part to your hand from lowest to highest cost. Then, after you have summoned all 7 thrashing parts, you add a Final Gambit to your hand. Final Gambit is probably the most useful spell in the entire game. When you cast this card, you gain 7 G, deal 7 damage to all enemies, heal 7 HP to all allies, and add 7 drafts to your hand, and summon Ultimathrash. Allow me to slow down so I can explain what makes this DT so useful. First off, not only do you get an additional 7 cards to your deck, which all have strong unique abilities, not only that, but you essentially board wipe your opponent with the 7 damage you deal to all enemy monsters and get multiple cards of your choice to add to your hand via the drafts you are given. Lower ranking players will often overlook this DT much like I did, since, at first glance, it looks like this is nothing more than a 5/9 haste candy card. This is the other DT I forgot about when writing this script, which is none other than Kara themselves. Kara is a 10/10 body that, when played, silences and kills a monster of your choice and gives you the Genocide artifact at the end of the turn it was played. The Genocide artifact is the most useful removal tool in the game. This artifact gives you a real knife to use once per turn and removes it if you didn't use it. Of course, if you just got to kill a monster every turn for free, that would be way too overpowered. So, to counter this, whenever you play a real knife, you reduce your max HP by 1. You may be wondering why I would place Kara over something like Ultimathrash, and you'd be right to question me on that. Most people would say Ultimathrash is much better than Kara, but to be honest, I find it hard putting Kara any lower than number 3. I feel like the downside to this card isn't enough to balance out its sheer removal prowess. The fact that you can remove any card from the field just for the cost of 1 HP is way too strong for me to look past. Of course, people do lose even after playing Kara, so much like other cards in the game, this is not a play-to-win card. There's still strategies that can get past this card, which is why I have to place it at number 3 on this list. People are going to call me insane when this video goes live, and I'll probably be harassed in the comments for this, but at number 2 we have Soulless Chris, also known as S-Chris. S-Chris is the most used DT right now because of the meta. Basically, S-Chris fills your hand with completely random Deltarune cards if you've played 20 different cards that game. Not only that, but they cost 2 less G. You essentially have an infinite late game ammunition with this DT. Not to mention, to make this card worse, it has haste. It's not that giving it haste makes it large amounts better, it's just that they added haste to an already insane card. It's like rubbing salt into the wound. Who knows though, Maybe like how I found to enjoy the concept of Arcane Scepter, I'll find a way to enjoy Skriss. But as of now, this card is too OP for me to not mauled over. Let's just move on to the next one before I implode of anger. Number 1, I of course have the Vessel. During the process of writing this script, I was literally whining to the Undercards chat about how I'm going to be the most hated Undercards player for posting this video. Anyway, I may as well deal with the complaining when it actually happens, but for now, let's talk about the card. The Vessel adds an exact copy of an ally to your hand and 3 exact copies to your deck. This card is stupidly useful. Some people will say I'm over-exaggerating or that this shouldn't even be top 4, but here I am anyways. Imagine using this card on something like Metaton Neo or Casual Undyne. You could use this card on Vines if you're playing plants, or a super buff dog if you're playing dogs. You can do Papyrus or Muffet to have as much removal as you want. Hell, if you really wanted to, you could use this on a super buffed Receptionist too. There are so many use cases for this card, and I haven't even talked about the meta yet. Right now, there's a Vessel duping meta where you red wagon into Vessel and then use clone. The Vessel has such ridiculous amounts of use cases that I could go on for hours and not even be halfway done. To me, this card towers over every other card on this list besides Skriss because of the amount of use cases. As much as I hate to say this, if you disagreed with anything I said during this video, which, let's be honest, you probably did, tell me in the comments. One of my favorite things about making Undercards videos is hearing other people's takes. If I could, I'd spend hours reading through my comments just to see everyone's unique takes. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, but before you go, consider joining the Discord server. No, I really mean it. I know YouTubers constantly nitpick at this stuff, but I truly am looking to make an active community that I can interact with and make content with. If you are interested in being in events or participating in streams where I interact with viewers, head over to my Discord server to get notified of when I stream. You can also just straight up follow me at twitch.tv/6Kozi9. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next Undercards video.